The terminal was quiet, filtered sunlight bouncing off glass walls and sleek marble. Weston Vale moved like a man used to control, his pace deliberate, his black carry-on wheeling silently behind him. The air smelled like perfume, leather, and achievement. First-class boarding had just begun. His assistant had ensured priority everything: boarding, meal choices, noise-canceling everything. Weston didn't plan to talk. Just sleep, sip a scotch, and disconnect from a merger that had drained his soul and inflated his net worth. As he stepped into the cabin, the hush of luxury wrapped around him. Tan leather recliners, chilled champagne, and a faint hum of jazz. He adjusted his jacket, nodded once to the flight attendant, and scanned the row for 2A. That's when he saw her. Row 1C. She didn't see him. Not yet. Her face was turned toward the window, sunglasses oversized and elegant. Her braids were pulled up high, and her skin shimmered with the kind of glow that came from peace or power. A small boy beside her, about 5, jabbered with wild delight. "Triceratops has 3 horns, Mommy. Like a unicorn, but way cooler." Weston's breath caught in his throat. The boy's voice, that laugh, that dimple, his exact dimple. The air between them thickened. The steward smiled, offering help with his bag. Weston shook his head, eyes still locked on the child who looked exactly like him. His tongue was dry, his pulse chaotic. She looked up at the boy, lips curling softly. "Unicorns are still cooler." "No, they're not." "You're right." She kissed his temple. "Triceratops wins." Weston hadn't seen her in nearly 7 years, but everything in him recognized her. Raya Bennett, his once everything. She hadn't changed, at least not in ways the world could touch. Still stunning, still calm in a way that made everything else seem frantic. She turned slightly, stretching to adjust the boy's seatbelt, and saw him. Her posture didn't flinch. No gasp, just a subtle shift of the chin and the faintest narrowing of the eyes behind those glasses. "Weston Vale," she said, as if reading a name off a press release. "Didn't expect you in first class. Thought you had your own plane by now." "I do," he replied. "I needed quiet." She closed the book in her lap. "Shame. You won't get any here." The boy tugged on her sleeve. "Mommy, who's that man?" She didn't answer. Weston stared, then forced out a breath. "I'm just a friend," he said, more to himself than to Cairo. The child grinned up at him. "You look funny." Raya's lips twitched. "He gets that from cartoons." Weston didn't sit. He couldn't. His feet were cemented to the aisle, his eyes flicking between the woman he lost and the boy he didn't know existed. She looked at him again, cool, unreadable. "Take your seat, Weston. The champagne's getting warm." He nodded once and moved past, body rigid, heart pounding. The moment he dropped into 2A, his chest caved. He ran a hand through his hair, then stared at the seat ahead. She was 3 feet away, and that boy was his. "Hello, amazing family of love and twilights with Dr. Phillips. Please tell us what part of the world you're watching from. Let's see how connected we are. And if you're new here, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe, because here we share the best love stories in the world. Now, enjoy this beautiful story as we continue." Weston sat stiffly, fingers clenched over the armrest as the plane began to taxi. His mind wasn't on altitude or flight time, it was on the boy. Cairo. That had to be his name. Raya had whispered it softly. "Cairo, don't spill the juice." It echoed now, along with the sound of the boy's laughter, tugging at memories Weston didn't know he still carried. From his seat, he could just barely see the top of the child's curls over the divider. Every now and then, a tiny foot bounced, or a hand shot up enthusiastically to show his mother something invisible in the clouds. And every now and then, Weston's chest tightened again. It wasn't a resemblance, it was replication. Cairo's face mirrored Weston's childhood photos, down to the deep crease in his left cheek when he smiled. The same almond-shaped eyes, same brows, same unruly hairline. There was no doubt. He hadn't been told. He hadn't been invited into this version of reality. And yet here it was, alive, breathing, giggling. "Can I have more cookies, Mommy?" "You already had 2, Raya replied calmly. "1 more? Fine. But that's it." Weston blinked rapidly. Her voice was just as he remembered, steady, nurturing, low and firm. The kind of voice that soothed headaches and made midnight feel safe. It was the voice that once talked him out of quitting his first startup. The voice that whispered her pregnancy fears when they thought it might have happened years ago, and then didn't. Only this time, it had. The seatbelt sign blinked off, and a steward came by to take orders. Weston barely heard him. "Mr. Vale, would you like your usual?" "Sure," Weston mumbled. Whatever that is. He wasn't hungry. What he wanted couldn't be served on a tray. Across the aisle, Raya adjusted her son's blanket. The moment her fingers stilled, she looked over. Their eyes locked. No expression, no flinch, just breath. "I didn't know," Weston finally whispered, his voice low, barely audible across the aisle. "You didn't ask," she replied, equally soft. "How could I ask if I didn't know? You never checked. That's not the same thing. I wasn't running away. Sure felt like it." Their words were sharp but hushed, coded for public airspace. The kind of conversation that hurt in silence. He leaned closer. "You really weren't going to tell me?" She looked at her son. "Tell you what, that you left a pregnant woman without a word? That your replacement was a press release?" Weston looked away, jaw tight. "You didn't even have the decency to end it properly, Weston," she added. "So no, I didn't tell you. I was too busy learning how to survive." Silence swallowed them again. The child curled into his mother's arm, thumb in mouth, eyelids fluttering with sleep. Raya smoothed his curls back, then reached for her book, but didn't open it. Weston watched the way her fingers lingered on Cairo's cheek. Protective, calm. She had done all this without him, and she hadn't just survived. She had thrived. "Is his name Cairo?" Weston asked. She didn't answer. He tried again. "How old is he?" "Do the math," she replied coldly. His chest caved again. Raya finally looked at him fully. "You disappeared, Weston, like a ghost. You left New York and never came back. I was pregnant, alone, and done waiting. I didn't owe you anything after that. I thought you were better off without me," he muttered, voice cracking. "Don't put that on me," she said. "That was your choice, your silence, your cowardice." Her voice wasn't raised, but her words struck with the precision of someone who'd practiced them in the dark, alone, after too many nights crying into a pillow. Weston pressed his palms against his knees. "I didn't come here to fight." She smirked faintly. "You came here to sleep." He didn't reply. The flight attendant returned with a tray. Raya declined her meal. Weston pushed his away without a second glance. For the next hour, neither spoke, but neither stopped thinking. The plane drifted over the Atlantic, stars veiled by midnight clouds. First class had dimmed into soft glows, reading lights, quiet chimes, hushed voices. Yet the tension between Weston and Raya pulsed louder than any turbine. Cairo had fallen asleep, tucked beneath a navy blanket, lips parted in innocent dreams. His head rested against Raya's hip. One small hand curled around a stuffed green dinosaur. He looked peaceful, untouched by the storm brewing just beyond his dreams. Weston stood up slowly, the hum of the aircraft vibrating beneath his bare feet. He'd kicked off his shoes hours ago. He walked toward her row with caution, as if stepping across a tightrope. Raya didn't look up as he approached. She continued stroking Cairo's curls, her book still unopened in her lap. "I'm not here to argue," Weston said, his voice low. "I know," she said. "Arguing would require you to have stood your ground back then." He let that one settle. "Can I sit?" Raya didn't answer, but she didn't stop him either. He lowered himself onto the edge of the seat across from her, facing sideways, knees nearly brushing hers. "I know I hurt you." She let out a dry breath. "That's such a pretty summary for what you did." "I didn't leave you," he said. "I ran from everything, including myself, and you think that makes it better?" He shook his head. "It makes it worse, because I didn't even realize what I was running from until now." She finally looked at him. Her expression was unreadable, somewhere between weary and alert, like a soldier who'd seen enough battles to no longer flinch. "You left," she said, "and I didn't chase you, not because I was strong, but because I was already building walls to keep the hurt from bleeding out. I should have been there. Yeah, you should have. I didn't even know you were pregnant. You didn't call, didn't ask, didn't care to wonder." He stared at his hands. "I cared. I just buried it. That's not love, Weston. That's abandonment with a nicer suit." Silence fell again. This one stretched longer. When he looked up, her eyes were on Cairo, soft, warm, full of something Weston had never known he could lose. "What's he like?" Weston asked, his voice nearly cracking. She considered the question for a long time. Then she said, "Brilliant, wild, too curious for his own good. He loves dinosaurs, hates broccoli, and insists every night on 3 bedtime stories, even if he's already asleep by the second." Weston's lips twitched faintly. "Sounds like a handful." "He's everything," she said simply. Weston swallowed hard. "Does he know about me?" "No. I told him his father was gone. I didn't lie. I just didn't explain." "Does he ask?" "Not often. I never made it feel like something was missing. I filled every silence with love." He looked at her, eyes aching. "I want to know him." Raya didn't answer. "I want to be there for him." Still, she said nothing. "I want to be better," Weston whispered. "For him. For you. For the version of me I abandoned too." She sighed and leaned back, eyes closed briefly. "Wanting isn't enough, Weston. Wanting doesn't raise a child. Wanting doesn't read bedtime stories when you're bone-tired or stay up during fevers with a cold compress and a prayer. I'll earn it." She opened her eyes. "You're not applying for a job. You're asking to rewrite time." "No," he said. "I'm asking for whatever time's left." Raya stared at him for a long beat. "You don't get access because you suddenly remembered we exist. You get access when you prove it's not temporary." "I get that." "Good," she replied. "Because I don't need promises. I need presence." Weston leaned back, gaze falling to Cairo's sleeping face. "He deserves to know me. He deserves stability, not confusion. I won't confuse him." "You already did," she said. "You looked at him like he was yours, and he noticed." "Children don't forget eyes like that." Weston rubbed his forehead. "I'm not trying to take anything from you. You couldn't, even if you tried." He met her gaze again. "I don't want custody or credit. I want connection. Start with consistency." "I will." "Then don't say another word," she said, her voice final. "Let your actions do the speaking." He nodded once. They sat in silence, the engine humming in the background. The plane tilted slightly as it began its descent path toward New York. As the lights came back on, Cairo stirred. "Mommy." "I'm here," Raya whispered. He blinked sleepily, rubbing his eyes, then looked at Weston. "You still here, mister?" Weston smiled softly. "Still here." Cairo stared at him, thoughtful, then turned back into his mother's embrace. Raya glanced sideways at Weston. It wasn't a bridge, but maybe it was a beginning. New York City had faded into the background years ago. The skyline, once familiar, was now distant, a chapter Raya Bennett had closed without slamming the door. After Weston disappeared, she didn't collapse. She recalibrated. She left the city with nothing but a suitcase and a flutter in her stomach. Too early to be called a baby, too loud to be called fear. There were no dramatic breakdowns, no sobbing voicemails, just a firm, private decision. If he was gone, then she'd stay. Stay grounded. Stay focused. Stay whole. She moved upstate, rented a small 1-bedroom near a library and a laundromat. The kind of neighborhood where no one asked questions unless they were offering a casserole. Every morning, she worked. Every night, she studied. User experience design became more than a career path. It became therapy. She coded between bottle feeds, learned wireframes while Cairo learned to crawl. In between diaper changes and lullabies, she became a quiet force in her industry. Clients didn't know she was a single mother balancing mock-ups with midnight teething fits. They just knew she delivered excellence. There were nights she sat on the floor, back against the crib, watching her son sleep. His breath was soft, his tiny fists curled near his chin. She'd whisper, "We're okay, just you and me." And they were. Cairo grew fast enough to catch her off guard with his questions. "Why don't I have a daddy?" She never lied. "You do. He just doesn't live with us." "Does he know me?" A pause. "He will." She chose words carefully, like steps across thin ice. She didn't poison her son with bitterness. She didn't color Weston as a villain. She simply didn't let his absence define them. Love, she decided, wasn't just about what you gave. It was about what you refused to withhold. She gave Cairo joy, wonder, adventure, discipline, and affection, everything she had, and some things she had to invent. She taught him how to say please before more, and how to pick up his blocks before bedtime. She taught him to ask questions, even if grown-ups looked tired. She taught him to be soft and strong, to feel deeply but think clearly. He knew where his lunchbox was. He knew his bedtime routine. He knew that I love you wasn't just for good nights. It was for scraped knees and spilled cereal too. And every single day, Raya woke up to be the woman her son would one day model his expectations on. Not just a mother, a mirror. There were moments, quiet ones, when the ache of what could have been crept in. Late at night, when Cairo's small body curled beside hers after a nightmare, or when she caught his smile in a grocery store mirror and remembered Weston's. But she never let that ache turn to regret. She'd loved Weston once. Fully. Fiercely. But love without commitment was like architecture without steel. It looked beautiful until it collapsed. So she built her own foundation, brick by brick, day by day. And when the world tried to praise her for doing it alone, she didn't accept applause, because it wasn't heroism. It was necessity. The city felt smaller now. Weston watched Manhattan slide past his car window, the skyline no longer inspiring awe, just questions. He leaned back, jaw tight, hands restless in his lap. He used to see the world in terms of acquisitions and outcomes. Merge this, eliminate that. Life was about precision and forward motion. But nothing about Raya or the boy she raised fit into a business model, and that unsettled him more than he was willing to admit. The ride from JFK to his penthouse was quiet. The driver made a few attempts at conversation. Weston ignored them all. His mind was elsewhere, trapped in memories that had waited years to resurface. He remembered her laugh in the dark, how she used to curl into his side on winter mornings, her feet ice cold but her presence warm enough to thaw him. How she'd dance while she cooked, just swaying in socks, humming old soul records. He remembered when she told him she might be late. She'd missed a period. Her hands had trembled slightly as she joked about bad math and birth control failures. He hadn't stayed for the test. A meeting had been more important. A future deal. A press release. He hadn't followed up the next day, or the one after that. And then, weeks passed. Then months. The shame didn't hit then. It hits now. Like a sharp weight behind his ribs. He thought he'd moved on. Built something bigger. Better. But as the years passed, something inside him hollowed out. A slow erosion, too subtle to name. Until now. Weston entered his penthouse and paused in the foyer. It was everything magazines praised. Glass, steel, curated art. Expensive silence. But there were no toys. No messy counters. No laughter coming from a room down the hall. Just echo. He slipped off his watch and stared at it. Timepiece, they called it. What a joke. Time hadn't kept anything for him. It had taken everything. He walked into the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and leaned on the counter. Raya's voice echoed in his mind. You didn't care to know. That part hurt the most. Not because it was harsh, but because it was true. Back then, he was scared. He saw love as something that asked for too much. Vulnerability felt like a trap, not a trust. So he ran. Not from her, he told himself. From the man he'd have to become to stay. Now that man stared back at him in every mirror. Older, regretful, ready. He pulled open a drawer in the hallway and retrieved an old photo, one he hadn't looked at in years. It was the two of them on Coney Island. She wore a yellow sundress. Her head was thrown back in laughter, arms around his waist. He remembered that day. She told him he made her feel safe, seen, and he'd promised to never disappear. He closed his eyes. He'd broken more than a promise. He'd abandoned a life. Now, every boardroom win felt small. Every award, meaningless. What did they matter if the boy who carried his DNA didn't even know his name? Weston set the photo down, throat burning. He couldn't fix the past. But maybe he could face it. The sun dipped below the skyline, casting gold through the windows of Raya's modest apartment. It was quiet, just the rustle of curtains and the occasional honk from the street below. Cairo had finally fallen asleep. Weston sat on the edge of the couch, nursing a glass of water, unsure if he was welcome or merely tolerated. Raya moved through the kitchen, barefoot, tying her robe tighter around her waist. She didn't offer small talk, didn't ask if he wanted anything, just handed him a folded blanket and said, "He talks in his sleep. Don't freak out if he says something about lava." Weston nodded, eyes soft. "He dreams like I used to." "Don't flatter yourself," she replied, though her tone lacked bite. A long silence stretched between them. It wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't cruel. Just unfinished. Weston cleared his throat. "Thanks for letting me stay." You didn't really give me a choice. You parked yourself at the curb like it was fate. I didn't know what else to do. Try an apology, she said simply. He set the glass down. I'm sorry, Raya. For everything. She looked at him then. For real. No sarcasm. No armor. Just two eyes searching for truth in a man who had once disappeared like fog at sunrise. I had to be both parents, she said. Do you know what that feels like? I don't. But I want to. It's not just the diapers and doctor appointments. It's the doubts, the guilt, the wondering if your best is enough when you're already exhausted. Weston leaned forward. You didn't have to do it alone. You weren't there. I should have been. Yes, she said. You should have. She sat across from him, not leaning back, not relaxing, just watching, measuring. I kept waiting, she said, for a call, a text, a signal that maybe you'd changed your mind, that you remembered what we had. But all I got was silence. I didn't know how to face you. I didn't know how to face myself. That's the problem with people like you, Weston. You confuse silence with safety. His shoulders dropped. You're right. A pause. I kept hoping, she continued softer now, that someday you'd come back, not because I needed you, but because I wanted Cairo to know he was wanted, that he came from someone who gave a damn. He is wanted, Weston said, voice breaking. More than anything. Raya stared at the floor, then stood, pacing slowly. He's a good kid, sharp, kind, emotional too. He gets attached quickly. I'm not here to leave. You don't get to make that promise after a single night. I'm not making a promise, Weston replied. I'm asking for a beginning. She looked at him, arms crossed. You don't get to play the hero now. You don't get a welcome parade. I'm not looking for one. Good, she said, her voice firm. Because I'm not offering it. He rose from the couch and approached her. There was a long pause as he stood in front of her, inches away. I don't expect forgiveness. Then we're clear. But I need to show him I exist. She held his gaze. Then start by showing up, consistently, quietly, without fanfare. I will. And don't do it for me. Do it for him. Weston nodded. I want to earn both. Her arms slowly dropped to her sides. She took a small step back, giving herself space. The intimacy of the moment wasn't romantic. It was raw, cautious, real. He didn't reach for her. He didn't try to hold her hand or touch her face. He just stood there, acknowledging what had been broken, and what still might be repaired. After a long moment, she said quietly, We'll see. Then she turned toward the hallway, and left him standing there, blanket in hand, watching her disappear behind the door where their son slept. The next morning arrived quietly. Sunlight spilled into the apartment, warming the hardwood floors and softening the sharp corners of city life. In the kitchen, Raya stood in leggings and a loose tee, pouring cereal into a small bowl. Cairo hummed at the table, legs swinging beneath his chair as he pressed Dino stickers onto his cup. Weston entered from the living room, blanket folded in his arms, hair slightly messy. He looked different, less composed, less curated, more human. Good morning, he said. Cairo glanced up. You stayed. Weston smiled. I did. Cool, the boy replied, then returned to the important task of decorating his milk carton. Raya said nothing at first, just moved around the kitchen with the same quiet precision she always did. But Weston noticed the brief pause when she handed Cairo a spoon, the extra breath she took before speaking. You want coffee? She asked him finally. I'd love it. She poured him a cup without looking his way. He took the first sip and cleared his throat. Thank you. For not kicking me out. You were asleep. It didn't seem worth the trouble. He chuckled lightly. Noted. Cairo looked up again. Can he come with us today, Mommy? Raya turned slowly. Where are we going? To the park. You said we could after breakfast. She hesitated. Then looked at Weston. His voice was calm. Only if you're okay with it. She considered him, gaze unreadable. Then said, You can come. Cairo cheered and spilled half his cereal in the process. After breakfast, she packed a small bag, snacks, wet wipes, a toy car, and a tiny book Cairo insisted on reading just in case there's a reading emergency. Weston stood near the door, unsure where to place himself in this domestic rhythm. Before they left, Raya pulled on her sneakers and asked, You free tonight? Weston blinked. Yeah, good, she said. Because I have a proposal. He waited. You want to be part of his life, she continued. Start with one night. Alone. No staff, no tech distractions, just you and Cairo. Weston's breath caught. You'd let me? I'm not letting you, she said. I'm testing you. His voice dropped. When? Tonight, she replied. Come back at 8. Don't bring anything but yourself. Cairo ran up between them, holding out his toy dinosaur. This one's name is Spike. He's the leader. Weston crouched to his level. Nice to meet you, Spike. Cairo beamed. Raya folded her arms and watched. Let's see how well you do without me there to translate. Weston stood. Challenge accepted. She raised an eyebrow. This isn't a game. I know, he said. That's why I won't treat it like one. At 7:59 p.m. sharp, Weston knocked. No suit, no watch. Just jeans, a dark hoodie, and sneakers that looked a little too new, like someone trying to blend in but not quite sure how. The door creaked open. Raya's expression was unreadable. You're on time, she said. I said I would be. She stepped aside. Cairo ran into the living room in dinosaur pajamas, his curls wild and free. Hi, he yelled. You came back. I told you I would, Weston said, kneeling. And I brought my dinosaur knowledge with me. Cairo grinned. Let's play. Raya stood by the door, holding her keys and a tote bag. He eats at 8:30, bed by 9:30, brush his teeth even if he screams. He will test you. I'm ready. No sugar after dinner, no screens. He can't sleep with the light on, but he gets scared in silence. There's a white noise machine on the nightstand. Weston nodded. Got it. And don't ask him questions about me. This is about him, not us. Understood. She didn't say goodbye. Just glanced once at Cairo and left with a quiet, back by 10. Weston turned to Cairo. All right, boss. What's first? Cairo handed him a plastic T-Rex. You're the bad guy. Weston raised an eyebrow. Always. They started on the floor, toy dinosaurs battling for territory across a rumpled blanket. Cairo narrated the action with sound effects and elaborate rules Weston couldn't quite follow, but he didn't care. He listened. He reacted. He tried to roar at the RIT times. When dinner came, mac and cheese with broccoli, Cairo stared at the green stuff like it was poison. Mommy makes me eat it. Then we both have to, Weston said, taking a big bite. Cairo squinted. Is it gross? It's terrible. The boy laughed. Weston smiled through a mouthful. He burned the grilled cheese. He accidentally put bubble bath in the shampoo. Cairo peed on his sock while brushing his teeth. They both cried with laughter. At 9:15, Cairo yawned mid-sentence. Weston scooped him up, carried him to bed, and tried to tuck the blanket in just right. Cairo rolled over, clutching his dinosaur like it was treasure. Story time? He whispered. Always. Weston pulled a book from the shelf, something about a frog and a rocket, and read with surprising enthusiasm. He didn't skip a page. He didn't check his phone. He didn't rush. When the story ended, Cairo blinked up at him. Will you still be here when I wake up? Weston's throat tightened. If you want me to be. Cairo nodded. Okay. I like you. I like you too. Cairo turned over and drifted off, the hum of white noise soothing the room. Weston stayed a while, sitting at the edge of the bed, watching the slow rise and fall of his chest. Then, quietly, he stepped out, closed the door gently, and walked into the living room. He dropped onto the couch, exhaled, and stared at the ceiling. Juice stains on his sleeve, hair damp from bath time splashing. A little defeated, a lot humbled. He had closed billion-dollar deals in conference rooms full of sharks. None of that compared to getting a 5-year-old to brush his teeth and eat broccoli. He looked around. The living room wasn't large, but it was lived in. Photos on the shelves. Cairo's drawings on the wall. The scent of lavender and fabric softener lingered in the air. For the first time in a long time, Weston felt tired. Not drained by work, but full in a way that made sleep possible. He pulled the blanket over himself and closed his eyes. 10 minutes later, the front door opened. Raya stepped in and paused. She didn't see a CEO. She saw a man passed out on her couch, sock missing, hair a mess, arms slack. A small smile ghosted her lips. She moved through the apartment quietly, checked Cairo's room, and turned off the kitchen light. When she came back to the living room, Weston stirred. Hey, he murmured, eyes half open. Did he fall asleep okay? He's snoring. Weston sat up slowly. I survived? Barely. She handed him a glass of water and sat beside him on the armrest, folding her arms. I got soaked during bath time, he said. He throws water like a warrior. I read the same story twice because he made me do different voices the second time. He does that. Weston glanced down at his arm. I think I have toothpaste in my sleeve. Raya gave a small laugh. Then silence. He looked at her, eyes heavy but honest. I missed everything. She didn't respond. I missed your pregnancy, his birth, first steps, first words, first time he fell and cried for someone, and I wasn't there. Her jaw clenched. You can't undo any of that, she said. I don't want to undo it. I want to honor it. That stopped her. Honor it? She asked. He nodded. By being present now, by never disappearing again. She looked away. You've been doing it all without me, and you've done it beautifully. But if you let me, I'd like to do the rest of it with you. With him. Her eyes stayed on the floor. When his fingers reached for hers, she didn't move. But when he leaned in to kiss her, she pressed a hand to his chest. Not yet, she said. Weston nodded, and stayed seated beside her until the apartment settled into complete silence. The next morning arrived with the soft rustle of curtains and the clatter of dishes in the kitchen. Raya stood at the counter, pouring warm batter onto a skillet. The scent of vanilla and cinnamon filled the apartment. She didn't look toward the living room, but her ears caught every sound. Cairo's excited footsteps, Weston's low, gentle voice, trying to follow instructions on the cereal box, and laughter, bright, loud, unfiltered. She had never heard Cairo laugh like that with anyone else. She turned off the burner. Quietly, she walked to the doorway, leaning just enough to see them. Cairo sat cross-legged on the floor in a blanket Fort Weston had built from couch cushions and sheets. Crumbs dusted the boy's pajama top. Weston wore one sock and had sticker stars stuck to his hoodie sleeve. He was reading from a children's book, clearly improvising. His voice changed with each character, badly, but Cairo was too entertained to care. And then the dinosaur said, "You forgot my birthday." Weston cried in a goofy voice. Cairo erupted in giggles. That's not what it says. Shh, don't ruin the drama, Weston whispered, grinning. Raya stepped back before they noticed her. She sat on the edge of the bed in her room, staring at the floor. Her heart did something strange. Not pain, not joy. Just a quiet ache, like warmth after cold, unfamiliar but not unwelcome. For 5 years, it had been just her and Cairo. Every routine, every struggle, every choice had lived between the two of them. She'd built walls around their world, not to keep people out, but to keep herself steady. Now Weston had slipped through without force. He hadn't demanded anything. He'd simply stayed, showed up, and somehow made Cairo feel safe. That part scared her, because safety led to hope, and hope, if misplaced, could destroy everything. She changed into jeans and a sweatshirt, pulled her hair into a bun, and stepped back into the kitchen. When she entered the living room, both heads turned. Cairo launched toward her. Mommy, guess what? He made voices and built a fort and said, broccoli is gross too. She raised her eyebrows. Sounds like you two had a full night. Weston stood, brushing imaginary dust off his hoodie. I may have lost a sock in the process. She smirked. The price of parenthood. I'll pay it. She met his gaze. It wasn't flirtatious. It wasn't cold. It was careful. I made pancakes, she said. Cairo ran to the table. Can I have 3? One at a time. He pouted. Weston chuckled. She's tough. She has to be, Raya replied. They sat around the small table, passing syrup and napkins. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't picture perfect, but it was real. Weston poured juice for Cairo and reached for his own plate. Raya noticed how natural it looked, how quickly he adapted, but she also knew what happened when things felt too easy. When men thought affection erased absence. It didn't. After breakfast, Weston helped rinse the dishes. Cairo disappeared into his room, humming. Raya dried a plate beside him. He likes you. I like him. He'll get attached. I'm counting on it. She set the plate down and leaned against the counter. If you disappear again, Weston, I won't. You say that now. I mean it now. She studied him. He didn't flinch. I don't need you to win me over, she said. That version of us, doesn't exist anymore. I'm not here to win. I'm here to stay. She looked away, then nodded once. Then keep showing up. It had been weeks of Weston showing up. Never late, never loud. Just there. Parent-teacher conferences, bedtime routines, dentist appointments, rainy Saturdays filled with finger painting and stories about stegosauruses. No assistants, no chauffeurs, no headlines. Just him, slowly weaving himself into a life he never expected to have, but now couldn't imagine losing. And Raya? She watched. Every time he crouched to tie Cairo's shoe, every time he stood silently outside the pediatrician's office while her son got his shots, every time he remembered which juice box Cairo hated and never brought it again. She never said it aloud, but something in her was thawing. Then one night she showed up, unannounced, no call, no message, just a knock at the glass and steel loft door that Weston had once called home, but which now felt too large for one man's quiet regret. He opened it and froze. Raya stood in the hallway wearing a charcoal gray dress that clung to every curve like it had been molded to her body. Her hair was loose, cascading down her shoulders in thick waves. Her lips wore a subtle gloss. Her eyes, no longer guarded, no longer cool, intentional. I'm not here for closure, she said. I didn't ask. I'm not here because you earned me back. I know. This isn't about forgiveness. I wouldn't dare assume. She stepped forward. This is about me choosing, she said, voice low. Because I want to. Not because you asked. He stepped aside. She crossed the threshold slowly, the click of her heels the only sound in the echoing space. As the door closed behind her, the tension snapped taut. Before he could speak again, she pinned him against the wall. Their mouths crashed together, hungry, electric, unfiltered. His hands reached for her, but she grabbed his wrists, holding them in place. Don't touch unless I let you, she whispered against his mouth. His breath hitched. Yes, ma'am. She slid her tongue along his lower lip, then bit it, just enough to make him groan. You used to be the one in control, she murmured, unbuttoning his shirt. Now, I'm not asking. I'm not resisting. Good. His shirt hit the floor. She ran her palms over his chest, slowly, like reclaiming old territory with new rules. She kissed the scar near his ribs, the one he once got trying to climb a fence in Brooklyn, the one she'd bandaged years ago. Then she shoved him down onto the couch. Sit. He obeyed. She straddled him, the hem of her dress rising to her thighs, and looked into his eyes with a gaze that burned. You broke me once, she said. I know. And I stitched myself back together. Without you, I see that now you get to feel what I choose to give. Nothing more. His hand stayed on his lap, even as her fingers traced down his chest, over his stomach, to the edge of his waistband. You're shaking, she said softly. You terrify me. She smiled. Good. Her hips rolled forward, slow and deliberate. Their bodies pressed together, friction building between fabric and flesh. She kissed him again, slower this time, lips parting just enough to let him feel the heat of her breath, but not enough for surrender. Not yet. Her hands explored, firm, knowing. She stripped him bare one piece at a time, pausing only to look him over. You still remember what I like, she whispered. I never forgot. She stood, reached behind her neck, and let the dress slip to the floor. Weston sat speechless, reverent. No music, no candles, just breath and heat and history. She climbed back onto him, skin against skin, and this time she let him touch. His hands gripped her thighs first, tightly, then softer, as if rediscovering how to worship, not take. She guided him in with a slow press of her hips, exhaling a sound that was both relief and power. Neither of them rushed. She moved at her own rhythm, deep, controlled, locked onto his gaze. And Weston followed, every motion answering hers. No dominance, no urgency, just presence. When he moaned her name, she kissed his throat. When his fingers clenched on her waist, she whispered, Stay with me. And he did. All of him. No distractions, no armor, no hesitation. Only when their bodies shook in perfect, exhausted harmony did she let her head rest on his shoulder. Minutes passed. Then she pulled away, stood, and retrieved her dress. This changes nothing, she said without looking back. I know, he said, still breathless. But thank you for letting me feel you again. She turned at the door, fingers on the knob. Next time, you earn it. Then she left, and Weston exhaled like he hadn't in years. The next time, she didn't knock. She used the spare key. It was raining, soft, steady, and warm. Weston stood at the kitchen island, barefoot, chopping herbs for a late dinner he wasn't sure anyone would share. He looked up when he heard the lock click. Then he saw her. Raya closed the door behind her, dropping her wet trench coat to reveal bare shoulders beneath a black silk camisole. No bra. No hesitation. Her pants clung to her like a second skin, soaked from the rain, molding to every line of her hips and thighs. Her hair was loose again, damp and curling slightly around her collarbone. Weston dropped the knife. She said nothing, just walked forward slowly. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He knew this was her moment to own. When she reached him, she ran one fingertip down the line of his forearm. The air between them grew heavy, charged, silent. "You cooked?" she asked, voice smooth as velvet. "Just started." "Don't." He turned off the stove without taking his eyes off her. She stepped closer, placed both hands on his chest. "You've been showing up. I will keep showing up." She looked at him carefully. "Then tonight isn't about proving anything. It's about feeling everything. I'm yours." Her hand slid down, finding the hem of his shirt. She pulled it over his head with one fluid motion, then leaned in and placed her lips at the hollow of his throat. "I want you slow," she whispered, "and quiet, and desperate only for me." "Yes." She unbuttoned her pants and peeled them down, stepping out with deliberate grace. She wasn't hurrying. She wanted to be seen, claimed, not with words, but with reverence. She stood in front of him in nothing but black lace panties and damp skin that shimmered under the loft's low lighting. "Bedroom," she said, turning her back and walking ahead. Weston followed like gravity had changed direction. In the bedroom, she climbed onto the bed, spreading herself across the sheets as if they belonged to her. And they did now. "Strip," she commanded. He obeyed. Naked before her, he waited. She crawled to him, like temptation wrapped in satin and stormlight. Her mouth found his chest, kissing each inch with a slow hunger that burned more than it soothed. When she pushed him down, straddling his hips, her eyes never left his. She guided him into her inch by inch, breath catching at the stretch, the fullness, the history. Her hips moved with intention, slow circles that drove him mad. "Touch me," she said, "but don't rush." His hands found her waist first, then slid up her back over her ribs, finally cupping her breasts, thumbs grazing across her hardened nipples. She gasped, quiet but sharp, and rocked harder. Weston whispered her name like a vow. She leaned down, pressing her forehead to his, hips grinding with more rhythm now. "You used to want control," she murmured. "I used to be a fool." She smiled, then moaned when he lifted his hips to meet hers, perfectly synced, like music without instruments. Their bodies moved together, sweat slicked and breathing hard, gasps tangled with kisses. Her lips met his again, tongue teasing, biting, claiming. Her nails dug into his chest. His fingers held her thighs tightly, not guiding, just anchoring. The tension built slowly, a climb with no shortcuts. Her pace never faltered. She rode him with purpose, moaning softly into his ear. "I want to remember this," she whispered. "You will," he breathed. She gripped his jaw. "Look at me." He did. Her climax came not in a scream, but in a long drawn-out cry, his name exhaled in surrender. Her body trembled around him, and the aftershocks pulled him over the edge seconds later. He came with a growl, his back arching beneath her, hands gripping her hips as if afraid she'd disappear again. She collapsed onto his chest, hearts pounding together. For a while they said nothing, just stayed there, skin on skin, breath on breath. She traced circles over his collarbone with her fingertip. He ran a hand down her spine, then kissed her shoulder. After a long silence, she whispered, "This still doesn't mean we're fixed." He nodded. "I know, but I wanted it." He turned his head to look at her. "So did I. I'm not here to heal you. I'm here to do the healing myself." She exhaled. "Good." Then, still naked, she curled into his side. He pulled the blanket over them both, and for once, Weston Vale fell asleep with nothing left to chase, except the woman in his arms. Morning light painted the room in pale amber. Weston stirred first, reaching for the warmth beside him. But the space was empty. Cool. He sat up slowly, sheets tangled around his hips. The air smelled like lavender and last night's memory, clean sweat, silk, and the quiet ache of closeness. Raya stood near the window, back to him. She wore one of his button-down shirts, sleeves rolled to her elbows. Her arms were crossed, and her gaze fixed on the rain-slicked skyline outside. Weston leaned back against the headboard. He didn't speak right away. When he finally did, his voice was low. Was it a mistake? No, she replied without turning. It was a choice. He nodded, though she couldn't see it. Then why does it feel like you're already gone? She exhaled. Because I can't afford to fall for potential again. Weston sat up straighter. That's not what this is. It's exactly what this is, she said, finally facing him. You've shown up, yes. You've changed maybe. But I'm not here to test how long you'll stay. You don't believe me. I believe you believe yourself, right now. He didn't flinch. She walked over slowly, stopped at the edge of the bed. I needed that last night, she admitted. Not for validation, not to forgive, but to remember. Remember what? That I still have power, that I can choose pleasure without tying it to promises. His voice softened. You don't owe me explanations. I know, but I need to say it. He looked down. I meant what I said. I'm here, not just for a night, not just for the good parts. Her eyes narrowed gently. That's the thing. There won't always be good parts. There'll be tantrums, doctor bills, missed appointments, emotional landmines you won't see coming. I want all of it. She searched his face for a long moment. I believe you want it, she said, but I've lived what it's like when wanting turns into walking away. Weston stood and walked to her, bare feet silent on the hardwood. He reached for her hand. She let him take it, but didn't lean in. He pressed her knuckles to his lips. You're not just a chapter I skipped. You're the entire book I never finished. You can't rewrite it. I don't want to rewrite it, he said. I want to turn the page. Her breath caught, but she didn't move closer. Instead, she pulled her hand gently from his and said, Shower's yours first. I've got to get Cairo ready for school. And just like that, the moment ended. But not with finality, with space. And that, Weston realized, was its own kind of trust. Hello, my amazing family of love and twilights. How does this story make you feel? If you are enjoying the story, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button and tap on the like if this story touches something in your soul. Now let's continue. The old Weston Vale used to live in calendar alerts and international time zones. The new Weston Vale woke up to the sound of tiny feet running down the hall, followed by a crash, a pause, and an innocent, I didn't break it, I promise. He had traded boardroom battles for morning chaos. And strangely, it felt like winning. Each weekday began the same way now. 6:45 a.m. He brewed coffee in Raya's kitchen while Cairo picked his own socks and never matched them. 7:10 a.m. They debated cereal choices like world leaders at a summit. Cairo always won. 7:40 a.m. Weston knelt by the front door and tied tiny shoelaces with fingers once trained to sign billion-dollar deals. He still wore tailored shirts, but now they were wrinkled and sometimes stained with juice. He still checked emails, but after drop-off, and for the first time in years, he had learned how to slow down. Not because it was easy, but because it mattered. Every morning, Raya watched quietly. She didn't compliment or correct. She simply observed. Weston knew he was still being tested, not with words, but with time. And time, he was learning, was the only way to truly rebuild anything worth keeping. At school, Cairo ran toward his classroom, arms swinging, lunchbox in hand. Weston followed behind, waving to the teacher, then crouched to his son's height. Be good. I'm always good. That's debatable. Cairo giggled. Love you. Weston paused. It was the first time he'd heard those words from him. He swallowed the lump in his throat and replied, Love you more. The boy grinned and darted inside. Weston stood in the hallway a moment longer, letting it sink in. Later that day, he picked up takeout for dinner. Raya's favorite soup and Cairo's obsession, anything with chicken nuggets. He even brought extra dipping sauces because Cairo got very emotional about ketchup levels. When he stepped into the apartment, Cairo ran to him and shouted, Daddy! It stopped him cold. Raya froze from where she stood in the kitchen, eyes wide. She didn't say anything, just watched. Cairo didn't realize what he'd said. He just grabbed the bag and rummaged through it. Weston looked at Raya. Her face gave nothing away, but her grip on the dish towel tightened. Later that night, while Cairo brushed his teeth, Raya walked over to Weston on the couch. He called you that. I know. He's not wrong. Weston turned toward her. Careful. But I need to know you understand what that means. I do. Being a father isn't about biology. It's about every moment after. He nodded. I'm not going anywhere. She looked at him for a long moment, then simply said, good. She didn't need a grand declaration. She needed consistency. And he was finally ready to give it. Therapy wasn't something Weston ever imagined putting on his calendar. But every Thursday at 3 p.m., he sat on the same leather chair in a quiet midtown office, across from a woman who barely blinked as he unpacked years of silence and self-sabotage. At first, he hated it. He hated the stillness, the long pauses, the gentle, piercing questions that didn't let him hide behind logic or achievement. What were you running from? She asked once. My father, he said. And what did that look like? Leaving before being left. The words hit harder than he expected. He had never said them aloud before. Not to Raya, not even to himself. Week by week, the truth came out in fragments. His childhood, full of locked doors and late-night shouting. His first girlfriend, who begged him to talk about emotions and eventually stopped trying. His early 20s, where success became armor and detachment looked like discipline. And then Raya, the first person who saw through all of it, and the one he hurt the most. The therapist didn't scold him. She didn't pity him either. She just kept asking the right questions. What did love look like in your home growing up? A transaction, he replied. It was earned and lost. And what does love look like to you now? Weston paused. It looks like showing up, he said. It looks like doing dishes with Cairo and folding Raya's laundry without being asked. It looks like learning to sit in discomfort instead of disappearing. The therapist nodded. Then that's where you begin. On the outside, Weston still looked polished. Crisp lines, calm voice, reliable routine. But on the inside, he was wrestling. With guilt. With the image of Cairo's first birthday he'd missed. With the night Raya had likely cried herself to sleep while he celebrated a product launch with champagne. With the question, what kind of man am I willing to become? He didn't have all the answers, but he knew the man he used to be wasn't welcome anymore. Not by Cairo, not by Raya, and not by the version of himself he was trying to build. One evening, he stood in front of the mirror, tying Cairo's tiny red hoodie after brushing his teeth. The boy looked up at him and asked, Were you always my daddy? Weston froze. I don't know, Cairo added. Mommy says you're learning. Weston knelt and cupped the boy's cheek. I'm learning every day, he said softly. But I've loved you since the moment I saw you. Cairo leaned into his hand. Good, he whispered, 'cause I think you're doing okay. That night, Weston didn't sleep right away. He lay awake beside his son on the small pull-out bed in Raya's guest room, watching the boy breathe. And for the first time in years, the silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like peace. It started with an apple, a half-eaten one to be exact. Weston had packed Cairo's lunch that morning, apple slices, peanut butter, and those tiny square crackers he liked. He even remembered the dinosaur-shaped napkin. That afternoon, as they walked home from school, Cairo swung his backpack and said, You missed a spot on my apple. Weston blinked. What spot? Cairo grinned. The little brown part. Mommy always cuts that out. Weston winced. I'm still learning. Cairo shrugged. It's okay, Daddy. He said it like it had always been true, like it was the most natural word in the world. Daddy. No hesitation. Weston stopped walking. Cairo tugged his hand. What? Weston dropped to one knee on the sidewalk, pulling his son into a hug so firm it made the boy laugh. You okay? Cairo asked, muffled against his chest. Weston couldn't speak at first. He just nodded. That single word, spoken so casually, meant more than any contract, more than any title he'd ever earned. Cairo had chosen him back, not because he was perfect, but because he stayed. That night, Weston told Raya. She had just finished grading papers at the kitchen table, hair piled high, fingers smudged with ink. He sat across from her, heart still pounding. He called me Daddy, he said quietly. She didn't smile. She didn't gush. She just stared at him for a moment, then nodded. He chose you, she said. Don't fumble it. I won't. She leaned back in her chair, watching him. You're not the man I fell in love with, she said. Weston's chest tightened. You're quieter now, slower, still figuring things out. He braced for a rejection. But, she continued, that might be a good thing. He looked at her, eyes searching. You're not performing anymore, she said. You're present. He nodded slowly. That's who I want to be, for him, for you. Raya stood, gathered her papers, and paused before walking away. You're doing okay, she said softly. And somehow, those 3 words meant everything. Not approval, not completion, but recognition. And Weston would take that any day. The leaves had started to turn. Bright amber clung to tree limbs while crisp air whispered promises of change through open windows. Raya stood in the doorway of the new home, Cairo's hand in hers, Weston's arm cradling a box of toys. The place wasn't extravagant. No marble floors, no sweeping glass balconies. Just a modest 3-bedroom with a backyard and creaky stairs that needed fixing. But it was theirs. Weston hadn't asked them to move in. He just started building a life they could walk into without pressure. He had shown up every day, packing lunches, folding laundry, fixing wobbly shelves. Not once did he try to call it a favor. He simply did it until it became normal. Until normal felt safe. And safety, Raya realized, was what made love possible again. One Saturday morning, Weston asked Raya to meet him in the backyard. Cairo was inside watching cartoons, blissfully unaware. Raya stepped outside to find Weston standing beneath the maple tree, hands tucked into the pockets of his jacket. She tilted her head. What's going on? He smiled, small and sure. Come here. She walked toward him slowly, arms folded. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. Not a box, not a ring, just a key. A plain silver key on a leather string. He held it out. She looked at it, then at him. It's not flashy, he said. It doesn't sparkle, but it opens every part of my life, my time, my space, my effort, my plans, everything. She swallowed. And you're giving that to me? I'm not asking you to be mine, he said. You've never stopped being your own. I'm asking to be part of what you've built, not because I deserve it, but because I'm ready to hold it with you. She stared at the key for a long moment. You're not proposing, she said. I am, he replied, but not with a ring, not yet. She raised an eyebrow. Why not? Because we're not building a moment, he said. We're building a life, and I'd rather give you a door to walk through than a gem to wear. Her throat tightened. He stepped closer, voice quiet. I know what I used to be. I know what I missed, but I also know who I am now. And I know who I want beside me when the light's off and the dishes are still in the sink and the kid won't stop asking dinosaur questions at bedtime. She laughed, softly, but it cracked something open. Weston extended the key again. So, this is my yes. You get to decide if it's a yes back. She took the key, slowly wrapping her fingers around it, and nodded, not with a squeal, not with a speech, just a steady, knowing nod. Yes. He exhaled, stepped forward, and kissed her. Gently, like a man who knew what it meant to earn trust one breath at a time. They stayed like that for a while, arms around each other, leaves falling behind them like silent applause. The key sat on Raya's nightstand for 3 days. She didn't wear it, didn't hide it either, just left it there, visible, tangible, waiting. Weston didn't ask about it once. He cooked dinner, folded laundry, helped Cairo build a cardboard rocket in the living room. But he never pressed. Never hovered, never begged. That was how she knew he meant it. Not just the key, everything. On the 4th morning, she picked it up, wrapped the leather string around her wrist like a bracelet. Cairo was in his room, humming to himself. Weston was in the kitchen, barefoot, flipping pancakes that were definitely starting to burn. She walked up behind him and wrapped her arms around his waist. He stiffened slightly, then relaxed into the hold. She said yes, she whispered. He turned his head, smiling. Yeah? Yeah. He placed the spatula down and turned fully toward her, slipping his arms around her hips. Raya looked up at him. But I need something clear. Anything. We don't go backward. He nodded. Only forward. And we take it slow. Step by step. And you never stop showing up. I won't, he said. Not again. She leaned in and kissed him. Soft, lingering, sure. This wasn't fireworks or confetti. It was steadiness. Trust rebuilt in small acts. Intimacy shaped not just by love, but by effort. When Cairo walked in and saw them holding each other, he grinned. "Are you guys kissing?" Raya laughed. "We were talking. You kissed after," he said. Weston winked. "Don't tell anyone." Cairo rolled his eyes and went back to his rocket. "Grown-ups are weird." Raya tucked her head into Weston's chest, and he kissed the top of her hair. She was wearing the key now, and this time, she wasn't just holding the door. She was ready to walk through it with him. They didn't call it moving in. There was no official announcement, no taped-up boxes or housewarming party. It just happened. One week, Weston brought a spare toothbrush. The next, he was staying through Wednesday dinners. Eventually, Cairo stopped asking when Mr. Weston was going home, because now, home had his voice in it too. The loft remained. Empty, but paid for. Weston didn't sell it. He didn't need to. His life had moved addresses long before the furniture ever did. Mornings became a three-person dance. Cairo always woke up first, usually too loud, always hungry. Raya made the coffee while Weston packed the lunch. Cairo insisted on giving them each a sticker after breakfast. Today, Raya got a red star, and Weston got a cartoon T-Rex labeled Epic. "Fits," Raya said, placing hers on her phone. "Barely," Weston muttered, sticking his dinosaur on the back of his tie. Cairo beamed. Teamwork. Then he threw his arms around both of them and declared, "We're the best family ever." Raya's eyes met Weston's over the top of their son's head. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Her expression said it all. So did the softness in her grip when she held Weston's hand on the walk to school. Afternoons were slower. Some days Weston came home early. Sometimes he picked Cairo up himself and let the boy convince him to stop for science snacks, which apparently meant gummy worms shaped like molecules. Other evenings were messy, crayons everywhere, missed emails, spilled juice. But they laughed through it. And when Weston burned the rice again, Raya just took over without a word. She wasn't grading him anymore. She was sharing the load. One Friday night, they danced in the kitchen. Cairo had fallen asleep on the couch after movie night. The music playing was low, old school soul, one of Raya's playlists. Weston reached for her hand without speaking. She went willingly. Their bodies moved slow, not coordinated, not rehearsed, just present. "I never thought I'd have this," he whispered. Raya rested her chin on his shoulder. "You almost didn't." He held her tighter, and they danced in silence until the song faded out. On Sunday morning, Weston found a drawing taped to the fridge. 4 stick figures, 2 big, 1 small, and a baby with a huge head. He stared at it, confused, then looked at Raya, who had just stepped out of the bathroom, towel in hand, expression unreadable. She nodded toward the crayon art. "Cairo's idea." Weston turned back to the drawing. "Is the baby?" She pulled something from her pocket. A test. 2 lines. He blinked. She smiled softly. "You ready for a do-over?" Weston dropped to his knees in front of her, wrapped his arms around her waist, and pressed a kiss to her belly. "Not a do-over," he whispered. A continuation. Weston never thought he'd Google how to soothe first trimester nausea at 3 a.m., but there he was, on his phone, whispering with urgency into the dim light of their bedroom while Raya groaned quietly beside him. "Try crackers," the screen suggested. He tiptoed to the kitchen, grabbed the last sleeve of saltines, and returned with water and a cold washcloth. "Too late," she muttered. He knelt beside the bed. "I'll try earlier next time." She cracked one eye open. "You've said that every night." He smiled. "I'm learning." She took the crackers anyway. They sat together in silence, interrupted only by the occasional hum of the refrigerator and Cairo snoring down the hall. Weston reached for her hand. "How are you? Really?" "Tired, moody, a little scared." He kissed her knuckles. "I'll be right here for all of it." She looked at him, really looked, and believed it. Their days fell into a rhythm of preparation. Cairo insisted the baby be named Spike, whether it was a boy or a girl. Raya vetoed the name, but Weston bought a stuffed dinosaur anyway, just to keep the peace. On weekends, they painted the nursery a soft green. Weston had never held a paintbrush in his life, but he learned quickly, with plenty of guidance and more than a few accidental wall splatters. "I feel like we're doing it right this time," he said one afternoon, wiping sweat from his brow. Raya nodded, dipping her brush. "Because we're doing it together." That word, together, landed differently now, not as a hope, not as a request, as truth. At the 12-week appointment, Weston held her hand through the ultrasound. The room was dim, quiet, just the steady blip of a tiny heartbeat on the monitor. He stared at the screen, awe softening every line in his face. "That's us?" he whispered. "That's them," she corrected. The technician smiled. "Surprise. Twins." Raya's head turned sharply. "I'm sorry, what?" "2 heartbeats. 2 babies. Congratulations." Weston blinked. "That's a lot of diapers." Raya squeezed his hand so hard he winced. He leaned close to her ear and whispered, "We've got this." She didn't say anything at first. Then, finally, "You better not be wrong." Later that night, they curled up on the couch. The house was dark. Rain tapped gently against the windows. Cairo had fallen asleep with his head in Weston's lap, toy T-Rex still clutched in one hand. Raya rested against Weston's shoulder, both their palms resting over her small but growing bump. 3 heartbeats, 1 history, 1,000 steps still ahead, but none of them had to be taken alone. The pregnancy books stacked up quickly. By week 14, Weston had read 4 cover to cover, highlighted half of each, and color-coded a spreadsheet comparing baby monitors. "I thought you hated instructions," Raya teased one evening as he furiously scribbled notes from a prenatal podcast. "I hated being unprepared," he replied. "Now, I hate missing things." She smirked. "You're still not packing the hospital bag. You'll overthink the socks. I already ordered 8 pairs." Exactly. They started shopping for baby items slowly. At first, it was awkward. Weston in a boutique baby store holding a breast pump like it might explode. But as weeks passed, he leaned into it. He measured crib dimensions like a contractor, debated the pros and cons of baby wrap carriers, compared wipes, became irrationally invested in the softness of swaddling blankets. Meanwhile, Raya found herself smiling more than she expected to. Not because of the gadgets, but because this time, she wasn't standing in a store aisle alone. At home, Cairo drew picture after picture of his babies, stick figures with gigantic heads and superhero capes. He taped them all over the nursery walls. "We're a team now," he announced one night at dinner, "like the Avengers, but with diapers." Weston grinned. "So, who's the leader?" "Mommy, obviously." "Smart kid." Some nights, Weston rubbed Raya's feet while she flipped through baby name lists. Other nights, he helped her out of bed when the twins were pressing into her ribs and everything hurt. She didn't have to ask. He just knew. He set reminders for her vitamins, prepped snacks she craved without asking, learned how to tie her shoes when bending became a struggle. There was no fanfare, just small things, quiet choices, and each one whispered, "I'm here." One Saturday afternoon, as they assembled a crib together, Raya paused, screwdriver in hand. Weston looked up. "Something wrong?" She stared at the half-built crib. "The last time I did this, I was crying between contractions, alone." He stood and walked to her, hands gently cupping her face. "I can't erase that," he said, "but I can be beside you for everything that comes next." She blinked back tears and nodded. He kissed her forehead. "Now pass me that tiny wrench before I break something." By the 3rd trimester, the nursery was finished. Neutral colors, wooden mobiles, matching blankets embroidered with tiny initials they hadn't even decided on yet. One wall held framed prints, a rocket ship, a quote from Maya Angelou, and a crayon drawing by Cairo that simply said, "We love you already." Weston stood in the doorway late one night, arms folded, just staring at it, not as a visitor, but as a father, a partner, a man who had finally stopped running. The house had settled into a new kind of rhythm. It wasn't quiet. There was no such thing with a 6-year-old in superhero mode and twins on the way. But it was stable, predictable in all the ways that mattered. One night, after brushing Cairo's teeth and checking under the bed for the imaginary dinosaur that sometimes comes back to visit, Weston tucked him in. The room glowed with soft lamplight. His framed drawings lined the walls. The newest edition, a finger-painted portrait of 4 smiling stick figures, hung beside the bookshelf. Weston sat on the edge of the bed. Cairo turned toward him, eyes wide with a question. "Daddy?" "Yeah, bud? What does family mean?" Weston didn't answer right away. He looked around the room. At the drawings, the scattered toys, the baby monitor on the dresser already set to 2 channels. At his son, his first chance, his second beginning. Then he leaned closer and said, "Family means showing up, even when you didn't before." Cairo blinked, then nodded. "Like when you missed my apple spot but packed extra juice the next day?" Weston smiled. "Exactly like that." The boy yawned and rolled over, hugging his favorite stuffed dino. "You're good at showing up now." Weston ran a hand through his hair gently. "I'm learning." Cairo was asleep within minutes. Weston stayed a little longer, watching him breathe. He remembered every version of himself that had walked away from something, an argument, a phone call, a woman who once whispered dreams against his skin. But not this time. This time, he stayed, until the last night light went out. The twins arrived on a rainy Tuesday. No drama, no rush. Just two healthy babies wrapped in white cotton, blinking up at the world with tiny fists and impossibly loud lungs. Raya held them both in her arms, exhausted and glowing, while Weston stood nearby, eyes red, hands trembling with awe. "They're loud," he whispered. Raya laughed, weak but proud. "They get that from you." The nurse handed Weston one of the babies, a girl, sleepy-eyed, with a curl of hair already peeking out beneath her cap. He held her like she was everything he had ever needed to protect, because she was. Back home, life became a beautiful blur. Cairo adjusted like a champ, declaring himself the big brother in charge of snack patrol. Raya rested when she could. Weston handled diapers, bottle warmings, midnight pacing sessions through the hallway. Sleep was rare, but peace was abundant. One evening, weeks later, Raya found Weston in the nursery. Both twins had finally fallen asleep. He stood by the crib, one hand resting gently on the railing, watching them breathe. She walked over, leaned into him from behind, arms wrapping around his middle. "They know your voice already," she whispered. "I talk to them even when they're asleep." She smiled against his back. "What do you say?" He turned to face her. "I tell them they're safe, that we'll be here in the morning, that we'll be here every morning." She cupped his cheek, her thumb tracing the corner of his mouth. "You're different now. I had to be. I'm glad you chose it." He kissed her softly. No urgency, no proving, just presence. That weekend, they sat on the porch with the twins napping inside and Cairo running laps around the backyard, superhero cape flapping behind him. Weston handed Raya a cup of tea. She looked at him with the kind of ease that only comes after surviving something together. "You ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't taken that flight?" He nodded. "I think about it every day. And I wouldn't have known what I was missing, but I would have missed everything." She rested her head on his shoulder. "Good answer." The sun dipped low, casting gold across the porch. And they stayed there, quiet, tired, full, not starting over, just continuing, exactly where they were meant to be. If you made it to the end of this story, thank you, not just for watching, but for feeling, for allowing yourself to sit with the beauty, the pain, and the power of second chances. This wasn't just a story about a CEO and a forgotten love. It was about growth, about what it means to truly show up, for the people we love, for the mistakes we've made, and for the future we want to build. Too many of us learn the hard way that love isn't about grand gestures or perfect timing. It's about presence. It's about learning how to stay when staying feels uncomfortable. It's about showing up after the damage and doing the work anyway. And sometimes, love doesn't come with a ring. Sometimes it comes with a key, to a door someone once closed, to a heart that's still healing, to a life that's still being written. So here's my question to you. Have you ever had someone walk back into your life after they left? Did they stay? Did you let them? Tell me your story in the comments. I read every one. Your words might help someone else heal too. And if this story moved you, if it made you cry or smile or feel something you didn't expect, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video, share it with someone who needs a reminder that love isn't lost. It's just waiting to be chosen again. Subscribe to Love and Twilights for more emotionally powerful stories that reflect real life, stories with meaning, with lessons, and with heart. And remember to turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. We're building something real here, and I want you to be part of it, because love is never just about how it starts. It's about who stays, and who chooses to stay, again and again. Until next time, stay tender, and keep believing in do-overs that become continuations.